When celebrities end up in handcuffs, the headlines explode. But here's the thing. Most of us remember the scandal for a week, maybe a month, and then totally forget they actually went to jail. So today we're counting down 10 celebrities who traded red carpets for prison jumpsuits, and you'll be shocked at who made the list. And the reason one rapper's prison sentence still shapes music today? Yeah, you'll want to stick around for that. Welcome back to A Sip of Drama, where fame meets felony and we sip our way through the courtroom chaos celebrities would rather you forget. Tonight, we're going behind bars, literally. From tax evasion to assault, from music moguls to lifestyle queens, these stars all spent real time in jail or prison. And some of the names on this list will blow your mind. So pour your tea, tap that like button before the guard locks the cell, and let's get into it. We start this list with one of the most controversial courtroom stories of the 2000s, Cyntoia Brown. In 2004, Cyntoia was just 16 years old when she shot and killed Johnny Allen, a 43-year-old man who had picked her up for sex after paying $150. She later told the jury she feared for her life, that years of abuse, trafficking, and manipulation by an older pimp named Cutthroat had conditioned her to believe Allen was about to kill her. But the jury didn't buy it. Instead of seeing a scared teenager, they saw a cold-blooded killer. The verdict? Murder, aggravated robbery, and weapons charges. Her sentence? Life in prison. And under Tennessee law at the time, life meant life. She wouldn't even be eligible for parole until she served 51 years. That's right. A 16-year-old girl staring down the possibility of release only when she turned 67. For years, her story barely made headlines. She disappeared into the prison system, just another inmate with a bleak future. But then came the twist. In 2011, a PBS documentary called Me Facing Life, Cyntoia's story aired, and it changed everything. Suddenly, the world saw not a heartless killer, but a teenager who had been abused, exploited, and thrown away by the system. By the mid-2000s, celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Rihanna, and LeBron James were tweeting about her case. The hashtag #FreeCyntoiaBrown exploded. It became one of the first viral examples of social media putting pressure on the justice system. And after serving 15 years behind bars, the governor of Tennessee finally stepped in. In January 2019, he granted her clemency. Cyntoia walked out of prison at age 31, free against all odds. Today, she's married, an activist, and even published a book about her journey. But here's the kicker. Most people remember the release and the celebrity support. What they forget is the brutal reality. This woman was sentenced to life in prison as a teenager, 51 years minimum, for a crime committed in a world of abuse she didn't choose. That's why Cyntoia Brown's story isn't just shocking, it's unforgettable. Even if most of us did forget it, until the hashtag brought her back. At number 9, we've got the ultimate 2000s tabloid train wreck turned comeback queen, Lindsay Lohan. Now, when people think of Lindsay, they remember Mean Girls, paparazzi meltdowns, and that infamous mugshot carousel. But what a lot of people forget. Lindsay didn't just go to rehab, she actually served jail time. And more than once. It started in 2007 when she was arrested twice within a few months. First for driving under the influence, and later for cocaine possession and driving with a suspended license. She was sentenced to 1 day in jail, but served just 84 minutes because of overcrowding. Yeah, less than the length of Mean Girls. But that was only the beginning. By 2010, her probation violations were piling up. Judges were fed up. That summer, a Beverly Hills judge sentenced her to 90 days in jail. The media swarmed the courthouse as she arrived in designer sunglasses, with FU painted on her fingernail. Yes, really, aimed straight at the judge. The drama was cinematic. Lindsay broke down crying in court. Fans screamed outside. Paparazzi chased the sheriff's van, taking her to jail. And yet, even with a 90-day sentence, she only served 13 days before being released, again due to jail overcrowding. Still, the damage was done. Headlines around the world ran with Lindsay in jail. But as years passed and she drifted out of Hollywood's A-list, people forgot she actually spent real time behind bars. Today, she's living in Dubai, married, and recently staged a quiet Hollywood comeback with a Netflix Christmas rom-com. But rewind to 2010, and this was the story. A teen movie superstar in an orange jumpsuit, crying in a Beverly Hills courtroom with her mugshot leading the evening news. it wasn't just rehab, it wasn't just scandal. Lindsay Lohan was one of the few A-list actresses of her era to actually go to jail. At number 8, we've got one of the most powerful voices in music history, Lauryn Hill. Back in the late 90s, Lauryn was untouchable. She'd gone from Fugees frontwoman to solo superstar with The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, an album that won 5 Grammys and is still considered one of the greatest of all time. She was a legend, young, brilliant, and at the top of her game. So imagine the shock in 2013 when Lauryn Hill, the queen of neo-soul, reported to federal prison in Connecticut for tax evasion. Here's what happened. Between 2005 and 2007, Lauryn earned over $1.8 million. But she didn't file her taxes. At trial, she admitted it, but argued she'd retreated from the public eye to protect her family from what she called a climate of hostility, manipulation, and racial prejudice. The judge wasn't moved. Lauryn was sentenced to 3 months in prison and another 3 months of house arrest. The court even made her lecture her fellow inmates about the importance of paying taxes. Imagine being locked up, and Lauryn Hill is your surprise motivational speaker. When she got out, she recorded new music, including a single called Consumerism that dropped the very day she walked free. But the prison stint left a mark. And here's the part most people forget. Lauryn Hill didn't just vanish from the spotlight because she was difficult or unreliable. For a chunk of that time, she was literally behind bars in a federal prison camp. Her voice once defined a generation, but for 3 months it was silenced by the IRS. At number 7, we dive into one of music's darkest scandals, Gary Glitter. Back in the 1970s, Glitter was a glam rock superstar. His anthem Rock and Roll Part 2 blasted through sports stadiums worldwide, and his sequined jumpsuits and wild stage persona made him a household name. For years, he was seen as a flamboyant showman who brought fun to the stage. But in 1999, the glitter fell off. A computer repair shop in England discovered child pornography on his hard drive. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 4 months in prison. His fall from grace was brutal. His songs were yanked from radio, and venues distanced themselves from his legacy. But the story didn't end there. Glitter's crimes spanned the globe. In 2006, he was convicted in Vietnam of committing obscene acts with underage girls and sentenced to nearly 3 years in prison. He served his time and was deported back to the UK. And then, in 2015, after a massive police investigation into historic child abuse cases, Glitter was convicted again, this time for attempted rape, indecent assault, and sexual assault of 3 underage girls. The judge gave him 16 years in prison. Here's what's wild. People still know the song. Stadiums played Rock and Roll Part 2 for decades, even after Glitter's first conviction. And many fans had no idea the man behind the music was behind bars. Gary Glitter went from glam rock hero to convicted sex offender serving serious prison time, multiple times. It's a reminder that sometimes the cheesiest hits hide the ugliest truths. At number 6, we hit one of the most legendary names in music, Tupac Shakur. Everyone knows Tupac as the voice of a generation, the raw, poetic rapper who embodied the struggles of the 90s. But what many people forget is that at the peak of his rising fame, Tupac didn't just battle rival rappers, he was battling the justice system from a prison cell. Let's rewind to 1993. Tupac was riding high. Platinum albums, blockbuster movies like Poetic Justice. But behind the fame was chaos, constant arrests for assault, gun charges, and public brawls. Then came the case that changed everything. That year, Tupac was accused of sexually abusing a woman in a New York hotel room. Prosecutors claimed he and associates assaulted her. Tupac insisted it was consensual and that he was being targeted. The trial became a media circus, with fans rallying outside the courthouse and tabloids painting him as either a dangerous thug or a misunderstood poet. In December 1994, the verdict dropped, guilty of first-degree sexual abuse. The judge sentenced him to 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison. Here's the jaw-dropper. Just 1 day before the verdict, Tupac was shot 5 times in a New York recording studio lobby. He survived, but paranoia exploded. He accused Biggie Smalls and Bad Boy Records of setting him up. That moment, trial plus shooting, lit the fuse for the East Coast versus West Coast rap war that defined the 90s. By February 1995, Tupac entered Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York. But prison didn't silence him. Behind bars, he gave interviews, wrote letters to fans, and began drafting some of his most personal lyrics. He described prison as both hellish and clarifying, saying he could finally see who was really loyal. And then came the Suge Knight twist. Death Row Records' infamous CEO posted $1.4 million bail to get Tupac out in October 1995, on the condition that Tupac sign with Death Row. Within weeks of walking free, Tupac recorded All Eyes on Me, the first double rap album ever released, and one of the best-selling hip-hop albums in history. Think about that. Without prison, without Suge Knight's bail deal, we might never have gotten the music that turned Tupac into an immortal legend. And yet, here's what people forget. Tupac didn't just rap about jail. He lived it. He was a convicted felon, serving real time, at the absolute height of his career. His prison stint didn't end his legacy. It supercharged it. Tupac once said, "I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee I will spark the brain that will change the world." Even from a prison cell, that spark was still burning. Quick pit stop before we move on. If you're enjoying this trip down the prison pipeline, smash that like button, subscribe, and join the A Sip of Drama family. Consider it your get-out-of-jail-free card for the YouTube algorithm. All right, let's step back into the cell block. Top 5 starts now. Kicking off the top 5 is a man whose rap sheet is almost as famous as the artists he signed, Suge Knight. As co-founder of Death Row Records, Suge helped launch the careers of Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac Shakur. But outside the studio, Suge was notorious for violence, intimidation, and brushes with the law. In the 90s, Suge spent time in jail for parole violations and assault. In 1996, after that infamous Las Vegas brawl the night Tupac was killed, Suge violated parole again and served nearly 5 years behind bars. For a music mogul, those years were like disappearing off the map, but his biggest fall came decades later. In 2015, while filming the NWA biopic Straight Outta Compton, Suge ran over 2 men with his truck during an argument on set, killing one of them. He claimed it was self-defense, but prosecutors weren't buying it. The case dragged on until 2018, when Suge struck a plea deal. The sentence? 28 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter. Today, Suge Knight is still locked up in California, with a release date not expected until the 2030s. Here's the kicker. While everyone remembers Suge's reputation, dangling Vanilla Ice from a balcony, walking into meetings with bodyguards, most people forget he's been behind bars for years. The once feared king of West Coast rap is now just another inmate with a number, not a record label. At number 4, we've got one of the biggest falls from grace in music history, R. Kelly. For decades, Kelly was untouchable. He sold millions of records, wrote anthems like I Believe I Can Fly, and crowned himself the king of R&B. But behind the chart-topping career was a pattern of abuse that critics and reporters had been calling out for years, only for the industry to look the other way. That all changed in the late 2000s. After years of lawsuits, settlements, and whispered allegations, Kelly finally faced the music in a courtroom. In 2021, a New York jury convicted him of racketeering and sex trafficking, accusing him of running a criminal enterprise that preyed on underage girls and young women. Witnesses described harrowing stories of manipulation, isolation, and control. Details so disturbing they left the courtroom stunned. And it wasn't just one case. Kelly was also hit with federal charges in Chicago and state charges in Illinois and Minnesota. The paper trail of accusations stretched back nearly 30 years. For every hit single, there seemed to be a silenced victim. The final sentence came down in June 2022. 30 years in federal prison. Kelly, once the king of R&B, left the courthouse in shackles, his legacy shattered. Here's the part many people forget. Long before the Netflix docuseries Surviving R. Kelly made headlines, he'd already been arrested and taken to jail multiple times, including a 2002 indictment for child pornography. That trial dragged on for 6 years, and even though he was acquitted in 2008, the stain never left. Now, R. Kelly is serving real time in a federal prison. No stages, no tours, no comeback albums, just concrete walls and a record that will never be cleaned. And the irony? He once sang about flying. But today, R. Kelly isn't going anywhere for a very long time. At number 3, we've got the baddest man on the planet, Mike Tyson. By the early 90s, Tyson was more than a boxer. He was a global icon. the youngest heavyweight champion in history, a knockout machine who terrified opponents and thrilled fans. But in 1991, his image came crashing down. That year, 18-year-old Desiree Washington, a contestant in the Miss Black America pageant, accused Tyson of raping her in an Indianapolis hotel room. Tyson admitted the two had sex, but claimed it was consensual. The trial in 1992 was explosive. Washington gave tearful testimony about the assault, while Tyson's defense argued she went to his room voluntarily. The media frenzy was relentless. Front-page headlines, nightly news updates, the works. The jury didn't buy Tyson's defense. He was convicted of rape and sentenced to 6 years in prison, plus 4 years of probation. Tyson served just under 3 years before being released in 1995. Inside prison, Tyson was still a celebrity. He reportedly converted to Islam, read philosophy, and even had fans writing him letters by the thousands. But when he came out, he wasn't the same fighter, or the same public figure. Here's what's often forgotten. Tyson went to prison at the height of his career. He was only 25 when convicted, still in his physical prime. The sentence cut directly into what should have been his most dominant boxing years. He returned to the ring after release, even reclaiming heavyweight titles. But his aura had changed. The prison stint became a shadow he never outran. And yet, decades later, Tyson reinvented himself. From cameos in The Hangover to a one-man Broadway show, he turned infamy into entertainment. But the reality is, the man once called the baddest was also an inmate, serving real time for a serious crime. It's a chapter that fans tend to gloss over. But in 1992, Mike Tyson wasn't just a fighter, he was also a prisoner. At number 2, we've got America's original lifestyle queen, Martha Stewart. Martha was the picture of perfection. Cookbooks, TV shows, magazines. She built a billion-dollar empire teaching Americans how to host the perfect dinner party. She was elegance, etiquette, and empire, all wrapped up in one brand. So when she walked into a federal courthouse in 2004, accused of lying about a shady stock trade, the country was stunned. The charge? Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and making false statements during an insider trading investigation. Prosecutors claimed she dumped nearly 4,000 shares of ImClone Systems after a tip from her broker, avoiding a $45,000 loss. Now, $45,000 is pocket change for a business mogul like Martha. But the real issue wasn't the money. It was the cover-up. The jury decided she lied to investigators. And in July 2004, Martha Stewart was sentenced to 5 months in federal prison, plus 5 months of home confinement and 2 years of probation. The images were surreal. The queen of hospitality, swapping tailored suits for a prison uniform. She served her time at a minimum security facility in West Virginia, nicknamed Camp Cupcake. But prison is prison, and Martha later described the experience as horrifying and deeply humiliating. Here's the part most people forget. Prison didn't end her career. In fact, it gave her an edge. After serving her sentence, Martha came back to TV stronger, teaming up with Snoop Dogg for a cooking show that played on her ex-con image. She went from perfect hostess to pop culture icon who could laugh at herself. It's a rare case where prison time didn't destroy a celebrity brand, it reinvented it. But make no mistake, in 2004, Martha Stewart wasn't fluffing pillows. She was inmates number 55,170-054 at Alderson Federal Prison Camp. And at number 1, we've got the action hero who literally fought vampires on screen, but couldn't fight off the IRS Wesley Snipes. In the 90s, Wesley was Hollywood royalty. He starred in White Men Can't Jump, Demolition Man, and of course Blade, the Marvel vampire slayer that helped pave the way for the superhero movie boom. He was rich, famous, and unstoppable. But behind the scenes, Snipes was in deep trouble with the U.S. government. Prosecutors claimed he hadn't filed federal income tax returns for 6 straight years, from 1999 to 2004, while earning nearly $40 million. That's not just skipping a bill, that's waving a red flag at the IRS. In 2008, after a dramatic trial in Ocala, Florida, Snipes was acquitted of felony tax fraud and conspiracy, but the jury convicted him on 3 misdemeanor counts of failing to file his taxes. And the judge didn't go easy. Snipes was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. When he reported to prison in 2010, fans couldn't believe it. Blade, the half-vampire superhero who sliced his way through enemies, was now inmate number 43,355-018 at McKean Federal Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. Here's what's wild. Snipes insisted he was misled by shady financial advisors who told him he didn't legally have to pay taxes. He even tried to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. No dice. The conviction stood. Snipes served 28 months behind bars before being released in 2013. By then, Hollywood had moved on. The Blade franchise was stalled, and Snipes' once unstoppable career had lost its shine. What most people forget? Wesley Snipes is one of the very few A-list action stars to actually serve years in federal prison at the height of his fame. Not house arrest, not probation, actual prison time. Today, he's made a comeback with roles in Coming to America and indie projects, and Marvel is rebooting Blade without him. But his name will forever carry that surreal twist. The man who fought vampires on screen lost his biggest battle to the IRS. And there you have it. 10 celebrities who actually went to jail, even if the world mostly moved on. So which one surprised you the most? Tupac behind bars? Martha Stewart teaching cooking in prison? Or Wesley Snipes trading his sword for a cell? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to A Sip of Drama for more courtroom chaos and scandal breakdowns. Because if fame teaches us anything, it's that one bad headline can turn into a prison sentence. This is A Sip of Drama, signing off.